National Geographic. Everyone knows what they are and how they have been inspiring millions of us for decades. You might know Nat Geo from its TV shows, or you could be one of those who even bought their books and magazines. Surprisingly, very little is known about National Geographic as an organization. We might think of Nat Geo as a giant media juggernaut that has always produced high budget TV shows.
Action! Roy!
But that hasn't always been the case. In its earlier years, National Geographic was on the verge of bankruptcy. In this video, I want to take a deep dive into the history of Nat Geo and explore what its success might ultimately reveal about us as a human species. All of this began more than 100 years ago with a man named Gardiner Greene Hubbard. Born on August 25, 1822 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Hubbard came from a relatively wealthy family. His grandfather Gardiner Greene was a successful merchant in Boston. His father Samuel Hubbard served as a judge on the Massachusetts Supreme Court. Hubbard attended Harvard Law School and later joined the Boston law firm of Benjamin Robbins Curtis. Despite his career in law, he was socially active, helping establish Cambridge's water supply, founding a gas company, and eventually introducing a trolley line between Boston and Cambridge. At this time, long-distance communication was limited to letters and costly telegraph services. Western Union held a monopoly over the telegraph industry. Hubbard even appeared before the Congress to advocate for government's ownership of telegraph line to curb Western Union's monopoly and make service affordable for public. Unfortunately, his proposal was not accepted. In 1862, at the age of 5, Hubbard's daughter Mabel became deaf due to scarlet fever. Seeing her struggle, Hubbard played a key role in founding Clark's School for Deaf in Northampton. Later in 1872, Hubbard met Alexander Graham Bell, whose family had conducted extensive research on phonetics and visible speech. Continuing this legacy, Bell taught deaf students, and Hubbard wanted him to teach his daughter Mabel. Eventually, over time, the theory of natural selection makes them fall in love with one another. Meanwhile, Bell was working on harmonic telegraph that allowed him to send multiple messages simultaneously, surpassing the limitations of Morse code. Impressed by Bell's intellect, Hubbard decided to fund his venture. During his work, Bell realized his invention could be much more than just a telegraph, ultimately leading to the invention of telephone. Hubbard and his friend Thomas Sander became partners in New English Bell Telephone Company, with Hubbard as its president. Soon after, Hubbard started associating with various intellectuals and the scientific communities at American Associate for Advancement of Science, short for AAS, and realized how scientific innovations can affect people's life and change the way one approaches their life. Compared to our today's comfy lifestyle, back in those days, access to even basic amenities were means of luxury. Where most of the world was fighting economic depression, child labor, businesses exerting their monopolies, science was one of the few things that inspired people and induced curiosity for working towards a better future. So in the cold winter of 10th January 1888, he sends out an invitation letter to 32 people having expertise in various fields to set up a meeting on organizing a society for the increase and diffusion of geographical knowledge. This was about the same era when Van Gogh would paint Night Cafe, Jack the Ripper would murder at least 6 women, Kodak would introduce its first box cameras that would capture circular images, and many places on Earth were still left undiscovered. 2 weeks later, on 27 January 1888, National Geographic was incorporated with the aim of helping people understand the world around them through memoirs, essay, notes, correspondence, reviews, and more. This organization was open to anyone interested in geography, and Hubbard was elected as its first president. By October 1888, the National Geographic Society released its first magazine for 50 cents, or about $16 today adjusted for inflation. Unlike in recent decades, where the magazine featured striking cover images that caught the reader's attention, this had a very bland and low-key cover, with no images except for few illustrations. Instead, it contained pages after pages with wall of text which more suited to high school students than general public. By the end of 1889, Nat Geo had released 4 volumes, but only the third featured a printed image, one of North America. The first photograph of Herald Island in Alaska appeared in 1890. To cover more stories, the members of society for the first time, along with US Geological Surveys, jointly funded an expedition to Mount St. Elias in Alaska, located at the border of United States and Canada. This resulted in a lengthy report of more than 190 pages in the edition of May 29, 1891. Nat Geo continued to cover various reports over the year, but by then, after being in business for many years, they weren't generating tons of sales. They even tried to reduce their cost from 50 to 25 cents and introduced an advertisement to subsidize printing cost. In the November 1896 issue, Nat Geo showcased an image of Zulu couple from South Africa in attempt to cover the cultural diversity across the globe, which generated higher sales than usual for obvious reasons. However, the society's members remained committed to their traditional scientific reporting in the subsequent volumes. But the problem was, there was simply no appetite amongst general audience for that kind of scientific rigor, even though it was written in simple English. To add to their troubles, Gardiner Green Hubbard died in 1897. The society's revenue had increased from $1,140 to only $1,400, while they had accumulated a debt of $2,000. Alexander Graham Bell was forced to take charge of the society and became the second president of National Geographic in order to save it and carry on the legacy of his father-in-law. After the success of the telephone, Bell became engaged in his project of tetrahedral kites, with the belief that someday humans might be able to fly like birds. As for society, Bell believed that geography is a fascinating subject and it can be made interesting. At that time, there were no permanent positions at Nat Geo, and Bell thought he needed a full-time editor, for whom he was willing to pay a salary. Bell found a young man, Gilbert Hovey Grosvenor, through his father, Edwin Grosvenor, a historian and a professor at Amherst College. Gilbert had initially worked as instructor of French, German, and Latin, but thought that the job of editor would be easier, and he expressed his interest in taking up that job. In those days, popular magazines like Harper's Weekly, McLeod's, Munsey's, and The Century were regularly enjoyed by readers. Bell asked Grosvenor if he could do the same with National Geographic. Grosvenor replied, "Yes, I believe I can." However, it would take time for Nat Geo to undergo its own evolution, and success would not come overnight. By the early 1900s, there were about 6,000 magazines, journals, and periodicals that had come and gone out of existence. Bell recalled an incident where he and Hubbard had spent $87,000, equivalent to $3.26 million today, trying to save the science journal of the us we discussed before. Bell suggested Grosvenor that he was ready to invest the same amount of money in reviving National Geographic. Grosvenor, being in his early 20s, was hesitant to deal with such a large sum. He realized that additional funding alone wouldn't achieve his vision for the organization. However, he anticipated resistance from the older member of the society in bringing about reform. To understand what could make National Geographic stand out, he studied popular literature of that time that stood the test of time, continued to captivate readers centuries later. Grosvenor drew particular inspiration from Constantinople. A book by his father which featured 230 photo engravings were highly praised and sold well. This insight gave Grosvenor confidence that photographs were an invaluable asset. The only issue was printing at that time was ludicrously expensive. Each metal plate had to be hand-drawn, costing about $100. Gilbert sought to use half-tone printing which employed dots and circles instead of continuous lines in steel engraving. Each half-tone plate cost less than $20. While many argued about the necessity of this change, whether metal plate printing was superior, the reality was no one favored printing numerous images due to high cost. Most publishers relied on written literature to convey their ideas. However, this approach was soon to be proven wrong. Gilbert Grosvenor became the first full-time editor of National Geographic on April 1, 1899. at the age of 23 with a monthly salary of $100, lower than what he could earn elsewhere. Earlier in his tenure, he began sending out letters to everyone in his circles to nominate candidates for society's membership. Essentially, this functioned as a referral program. Alongside the magazine, Nat Geo also hosted regular lecture series delivered by experts in various fields. Grosvenor would sit in the middle of the lecture hall to observe how audience reacted and understand what truly resonated with them. In the island city of Saint Pierre lies a volcanic mountain Pele. In 1902, it erupted so violently that it consumed everything in its path, and around 30,000 people died in this catastrophe. Only one prisoner survived. Back in Washington, when news of this incident broke, a night lecture was organized on the topic at Columbia Theatre, which was jam-packed with people. The lecturer did had some photographs of the incident but was hesitant to show them, as the excessive use of images was discouraged. Grosvenor heard two young ladies behind him complaining, "Why doesn't he show exciting photographs? That's what we want." After all this time, it finally struck him, and society sent 3 men on the expedition to this island to cover the story, which was published in July 1902 edition. This time, along with detailed paragraphs, it vividly described an island that was once happy and vibrant, was now destroyed. Every tree, every building, nothing managed to withstand the pyroclastic flow of explosion. All the people died within minutes of the eruption. Similarly, the issue of June 1903 was dedicated to Bell's tetrahedral kites in an attempt to educate people about the world of aviation. But why kites? Even Bell didn't know. After all, Bell was a rich guy, and as humans, we don't ask that question. We just do it. Bell's kite were an attempt to build an early prototype of mankind's flying machine. Despite being lightweight, the triangular interlocking structure provided a great stability even in the crosswinds and delivered a decent lift force. This time, the magazine truly reflected what Grosvenor was trying to achieve. Pages upon pages were filled with detailed photographs and illustration, as if they genuinely wanted you to build your own kite, and gave their audience the feeling that they were the part of this journey. Getting many photographs for the magazine was not always easy in 1900. In December 1904, when the society was planning for upcoming January edition, the printer had sent a message saying that they had 11 empty pages that needed to be filled. Grosvenor had no idea what to do or how to fill them, but as luck would have it, he received a thick envelope filled with many images from mysterious city of Lhasa, Tibet, bearing a foreign stamp. They were sent by these Russian explorers to Nat Geo free of charge. Grosvenor selected top 11 images and sent them to be included in magazine, and the results were quite beautiful. Grosvenor expected to be fired for this decision, but to his surprise, everyone applauded him. Again, in the issue of April 1905, National Geographic highlighted the culture and ethnicity of people living in Philippines. At that time, US had occupied Philippines due to US-Spanish War. Many Americans didn't know about the life of people living on that island nation. Nat Geo was amongst the first to photographically depict how they look, what they did, and again, they had a picture of semi-nude women in an attempt to authentically express their culture. And guess what? It totally worked. This specific issue was such a massive hit to an extent that the society had to issue a reprint edition of this magazine. After all these years of trial and error, Nat Geo finally seemed to have found something that transcended the boundaries of spoken words, age, and demographics: the language of photographs. As saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and Nat Geo took that sentiment to heart. Things started to work in the favor of society. By the end of 1905, membership had risen to 10,000, which was triple that of previous years, and had generated a surplus revenue of $3,500. For the first time, Grosvenor could draw a salary from society, rather than relying on Bell to donate $100 monthly to him. Bell no longer needed to sponsor Nat Geo. His total contribution to society amounted $6,900, a far cry from $87,000 he offered in 1899. This marked the point when society began to make money, and Grosvenor soon gained greater control over Nat Geo's operations. All of this pushed Nat Geo to innovate further. The issue of November 1910 featured many hand-tinted images, while black and white photographs were hand-brushed to create an illusion of color. Nat Geo also became an early adopter of Lumiere autochrome photography, which had crushed fine-grained potato starch with light-sensitive layer to produce lifelike images, until Kodak released its Kodachrome film, which offered better color and was easy to handle. Nat Geo also became the first publisher in US to set up a color film lab in 1920. However, there was a brief period during the Great Depression when they had to cut staff salaries, though they eventually managed to overcome the challenge. After successfully establishing the magazine business, Nat Geo began creating atlas and book services on various topics resembling encyclopedias. By the end of 1928, the society had more than 1.2 million subscribers, and growth continued exponentially. The big breakthrough came when Nat Geo entered the TV business.
That first day of the cosmic year began with the Big Bang.
And we had liftoff.
What is time? Time is not absolute. When we describe motion, we do so as a function of time. A lot to consider, I know. I know.
Which allowed society to present topics more intimately, enabling audience to feel as if they were the part of the show. Over the last few decades, Nat Geo produced thousands of shows, which was really hard to rival against for any other company. Growing up, every time I watched Nat Geo show in my childhood, I always felt the sense of awe and euphoria. My favorite shows were Cosmos, Big Bigger Biggest, Air Crash Investigation, Engineering Connections, various space documentaries, and I can just go on and on. Nat Geo indeed played a very crucial role in shaping the way I view and think about the world. It's only because of the shows I developed a deep fascination towards science and especially engineering. I'm sure that you might have your own stories on how Nat Geo impacted you. Let us know in the comments box below. But still, we haven't answered one single question. What made Nat Geo so successful? What made them relatable to tens of millions of people globally? Sure, anyone can click photographs, anyone can make their own magazine. So why only Nat Geo? Well, if you have been following this video till now, you might realize it's the Nat Geo's ability to tell unique and exciting stories about our world. Curiosity has played a vital role in human evolution and survival. Unlike wild animals, we don't have any physical feature that would protect us from external anomalies. That meant our brain had to increase in size to figure out optimum survival strategies. This forced us to create tools, invent wheels, and eventually build up the colossal modern global society we have today. Nat Geo taps into this deep human psyche, connecting us where we came from and pondering the purpose of the existence in this world. From business impact, what I really like about Nat Geo is the ability to partner with thousands of explorers, provide them a platform to share their own unique stories about the world, rather than Nat Geo needing to send its own employees. This approach allows them to be more flexible in their operations. Take for example this image. This is the first ever color underwater photograph taken in 1926 by William Longley and Charles Martin. If you know anything about film or analog photography, you might understand to get a crisp image, you need a well-exposed environment, typically a bright sunny day. The moment you go underwater, you need extremely bright flashlight. Since photography was still in infancy at that time, you had to create your own flash using explosive based on magnesium powder. This was not only highly dangerous but so bright that it could damage your eyes. In fact, there was an incident where one of them was seriously burned and was unable to move for 6 days. He came dangerously close to being permanently blind. Whether you call it madness or passion, it's incredibly challenging to cultivate such do-or-die attitude in typical corporate environment we know today. And added to the fact that these individuals spend hours underwater, patiently waiting for that one perfect shot. It's not an easy job. Same goes for other discoveries that Nat Geo supported, uncovering Machu Picchu and the famous work of Jane Goodall with chimpanzees. Until her research, people didn't knew how similar chimpanzees were to us. This was even before DNA testing was invented. Today, we know that human and chimpanzee share 99% of same DNA. Nat Geo's impact can also be seen in the coverage of global warming and climate change over the last few decades. Think about it. Without Nat Geo and other media organizations, would we be truly aware of the damage human activity are causing to the planet? This awareness has led to creation of various global conservation movements. The list of Nat Geo's contribution goes on and on. Of course, it's impossible to cover every story Nat Geo has published since 1888 in just one single video. If you have your own favorite stories, leave a comment below. I would also recommend you to watch this web series called Photographer and read this book on 100 years of Nat Geo, where it has tons of amazing stories that didn't make to this video. I learned a lot from it while writing the script. And no, this isn't a sponsored segment. I'm just genuinely sharing what I really liked and appreciated. And yeah, if you have any question, queries or comments, leave down in the comment box below and I'll be happy to get back to you. Till then, stay connected, stay subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.